Welcome back to the Greg Pinneo podcast. I'm excited for another crack at this. We've got an amazing guest today. As you know, every podcast starts with a word, and the word that I've chosen for this particular podcast is the word principled. Principled. The explanation in my mind for that word is that there has to be some kind of internal template, some kind of go, no go, some kind of standard that says that this is what I do, this is what I don't do. This is who I am, this is what I'm about, this is what I stand for. And here's where I'm going to hold my ground, and here's where I believe there's a lot of grace and slack. There's what are your principles? Now, I know my critics, and there are some that say I have none. I disagree with that, but I'm certain, after knowing you my whole life, that the word or a word that describes you, Mark, is principled. I'm here with Mr. Mark Verbarendse. I've known Mark for many, many, many years. Mark is an amazing man, and I'm not going to be telling his story he is today because as you really take notes on this guy, you're going to learn something. So thanks for being here, Mark. I appreciate it, man.
Honored to be here, Greg.
Yeah, it's I want you to go way back, and I want you to go way back to this influence of your dad, and the way you and your brother were raised around, and the influence your dad had on you in life and in business at a very early age. Give me a picture of what it was like being in that world.
Well, I could sum it up with work.
Mm-hmm.
We were raised to work. We had responsibilities early on. And Dad was big on that, and there was what he instilled, I think, with my brother and I, is that from just little guys, there was nothing we couldn't do, and we had to do it to the best of our ability. Didn't have to be perfect, but you had to give it your all, and if you gave it your all, that was good enough. I was very fortunate. I grew up in a home where I knew I was loved. But my dad was, he worked very, very hard, and he instilled that on my brother and I, which brought us into and groomed us for the things that later on in life we've completed or groomed us for life and the journey we've been on. And I'm very, very thankful, and I do miss my father daily. And
yeah. I'm getting close to that. It feels like with my own that there's going to be a day. I'm who knows? None of us know, but I'm thinking a lot on his influence in my life as his life is winding down. And I heard a story once that I thought was just extraordinary. That your dad and the business he was involved in is similar, at least in nature, to the business that you and your brother have now going forward, but that you actually had a backhoe. You bought a backhoe before you even bought your first car. I want to expound on that. I think that's pretty unusual.
Well, I actually my love for cars. I actually had, backing up from that, it was like that, but. So when I started business, my dad asked me what I wanted to do, and I had the opportunity to go play football. And I said, Dad, I said, I know I'm never big enough to go pro, and I don't want to get busted up for free. I said, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to do what you did, and probably start off with septic tank and drain field and design and that sort of thing. And he was all, Dad was all yay and amen, and yep, Well, I'm going over to Burlington today. This was in 1981 still, November 81. and you'll love this. So we go over to the Brim Tractor Store. We're going to look at brand new backhoes, right? And I'm thinking Dad's just going to write a check for one for me, right? You know, help me out. And at the time, I had a 67 SS 396 Camaro, 66 SS 396 Impala, and a 72 240Z as a high school graduate. So we go
so
over there.
You did have cars.
I did have cars,
okay.
yes.
But
this is where this goes. Is so Dad takes me over to Brim Tractor, and people wouldn't believe this today, but subsidized money, special financing, 15.5%.
Right, right. I do remember that. Yeah.
So that was subsidized money. So we go over there, and they go out back this little test area, and I run one of these brand new backhoes, and all I'd run is Dad's old flivvers, he had a hard time finding the ditch with them because they were, so loose. And so I run this brand new crisp Ford 555, and I mean, what's not to like, And I mean, made me look like a pro on that thing. We'd been running the other stuff, And so we're on our way home, and Dad says, so do you think you see yourself in the seat of one of those? Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, I could probably use the ride-off, while you're getting established. And so you think that's something you'd want to move forward on? Yeah, I'd like to do that. He says, okay, well, I want to see the Camaro gone and the Impala gone, the 240Z gone, and a couple of dirt bikes. He says, let me know how much money you come up with. Now, bear in mind, I had about $4,500 in the bank at that point in my life. So we'd worked, and Dad paid us.
Right.
We worked.
Yeah.
But anyway, so when you said that had to get rid of the cars, I didn't even so much as have a pickup truck to take a girl out on a date, but I did have a backhoe and a dump truck.
You did. That's a heck of a night
out.
So
it's a long way to get there, but that's yeah.
I think that there underscores, a principle of sacrifice, that one of these pieces of equipment pays for itself and then some, if you know how to operate it. Other things don't. And immediately there's this division in your mind of like, okay, what's it going to be? You're just going to have stuff that looks good and is fun but doesn't produce? Or what comes first? And that kind of cleaning out and going, all right, let's set up business first. Let's get this operating. Let's get this performing. And then if you do well at that, then when you can afford it, then having a nice car or two, or I don't know how many you have, 20. You have a lot of them. You are a motorhead. There's
right.
No question about it. You love beautiful, fast cars and equipment and trucks. And tell me about that. I mean, at what age did you start working on the machinery, the equipment, the vehicles, the trucks, the dump trucks? Because you're competent in all of that. Like, you build things from start to finish. Was this your dad too?
Well, my sister brought up an interesting point. We were talking the other day, and we were talking about cars, and they think it's a little ridiculous the direction I've headed, but she says, Mark, she says, I'm not surprised at all. She says, when we used to go to church, she said, we used to call it your purse, and you'd come with one of those cinch bags full of Hot Wheels, and you'd be playing under the bench. And she says you'd get in trouble for making too loud of motor sounds, eventually. But so it goes on from there. But from there, Greg, it really started with we were brought into dirt bikes, and that gave us the onset of mechanical ability, because Dad gave you a little bit of overview, but he always afforded us the luxury of failure. And it went on all the way through my life, and we call it now the luxury of failure.
Explain that. I mean, I think I get it, but I want you to expound on that.
Well, let's just say that you go in and he said, hey, you need to use an impactor when you're taking these bolts loose. And, Dad, who's, didn't know what he was talking about, we'd go in there and we'd strip one out. And he'd come back and he'd say, well, now we got a bigger problem, And this is why you use an impactor. So he gives, and it can go on from that to, this is how you change an air can on a dump truck. Don't ever, in fact, I got caught doing this one time. It's a spring can, and the outer ring on a spring can, on the old spring cans, you could unbolt them. And if you unbolt the spring can, it will hit you right in the face and will kill you. And I was unbolting the spring can. He came in and goes, whoa, 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 whoa. do you know what just about happened? And he stopped me. He didn't afford me the luxury failure on that one.
Yeah, right.
Because it was a one-time, it's a one-shot deal. But you know, on other things along that line, in business, we'd get ourselves in a tight squeeze. My brother and I, sometimes just me, and he would come in. I remember one time I was digging up a sewer line to make a tap on it, and I'm in a wet condition. It's nasty. I got pumps running, and I'm digging, and all of a sudden I come up with a piece of main line, and I'm like, now what? And you got, a hillside full of homes flowing down on you. And I'm calling him, I'm thinking we need to call the military, and then, because we got a problem, man. Dad said, just settle down. I'll be right there. Keep that pump running. And whatever you do, don't draw any attention to yourself. You know, he was down there. I was waist deep in crap for about 4 hours.
Right.
And you know what? Step by step by step, we put that thing back together. And he says, now, do you realize what you did wrong? And we talk about it.
Right.
That's the luxury of failure. But with corrective action that comes in behind and says, settle down.
Right.
After this, you've been here.
Right.
And once you've been here, you'll know what to do next time.
What's so wild when I'm hearing this is, of course, we're going to get into the fact that your boys work for you right now, and I've watched you in action with your boys, and you're like your dad. Gee, what? And you're like, calm down. Mm-hmm. We got this. Don't draw attention to yourself. We're going to fix this without anybody knowing it ever broke. And this idea of staying calm, that's experience. Mm-hmm. What was the line you gave me a little bit earlier this morning when we were talking?
It's a classic. Experience is that thing you received just after you needed it.
Experience is that thing you receive just after you needed it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I love that line.
Yeah.
But the one that comes with that, too, is I always tell my sons, I said, was it, and here now I lock up, was it a mistake or a lesson? And I says, the difference is, did you learn?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
Life is full of mistakes, but if you learn from those, they're all lessons.
Right.
So same on the same principle.
Wow. Well, you started with this backhoe, and you started doing some drain fields and some septics, and you're right out of high school doing this, which I think immediately I can just picture it. It's like, you're on it. You've seen it. You know how to do it. You've got good backup, support, reference. Just give me the span of business life from that backhoe and a dump truck to what you do today. Just give me like how it grew over time and some of the projects that you were able and capable of evolving into in the world of, let's just call it earthworks, right? What does that journey look like professionally over all these years?
So I started off in septic tank and drain field, got my installers and designers license in a couple of counties, and I was the youngest at the time. I mean, I was 18, but passed all the testing. And during that time, I'm still making a backhoe payment because Dad didn't make that payment for me.
Right.
He took my money. We put minimum down on that and a dump truck. I used one of his old trailers. So I'm making that payment. I could barely make those payments with what I made working for my dad, maintaining properties and stuff. And so then I'm seeing the other guys running up and down the road, and if I could ever be like them, if I could ever just do earthwork and utilities every single day of my life, oh, what a great life it would be, And so anyway, I eventually, boom, bada bing, by 1983, I was servicing several main builders, doing side sewer hookups, septic tank and drain field, and some minor grading. Then by 1985, I had bounced into commercial work, and I was doing some hospitals and multifamily and stuff like that. It was right about then my brother and I partnered up. And then by 87, we were doing work out on the NAS Woodby Naval Base, doing some pretty major projects out there. Then in 1989, 90, continue on. We rolled back into some residential. We actually went to King County for a little bit And then him and I parted ways, and it was a good thing for both of us. And he went back north to the Oak Harbor area. I stayed south, and so by we had heavy presence in the NES Everett, and followed that line, commercial work. Then grew to we were union till 1996, and then got out of the unions, started Earthworks Northwest. That went until 2012. Earthworks Northwest, probably, I was up to 60, 80 guys in the peak. Don't really aspire to go back there again. And it was a monster. And then out of that, I started a company in 2012 where my daughters came in basically to pay for their educations as a women-owned company. And that's where Sitework Technologies then came into play. And now my sons actually own Sitework Technologies, and I need to correct, I actually work for them. So, but I'm still, and then we have Quilceda Excavation as well.
Yeah.
So, so it's been a journey. I love what I do, and I'll never do anything else. And I'll probably never stop working. I'll just take more time off.
Tell me the interplay that you've married your expertise and love for dirt work and site work with your own understanding and expertise in real estate. And talk to me about some of the real estate deals that you've done or partnered with, marrying your skill set with others or by yourself, how those two have joined together beautifully many a time.
Yeah. I was one that basically surrounded myself. I always surrounded myself with really smart people, because I consider what I do is I try to strengthen my weaknesses by hiring those that are much better at doing what I am not so good at doing. But as far as the real estate development goes, I felt, and my dad told me this too. He says you won't get wealthy by earthwork and utilities alone. It'll provide you a very good living and very good cash flow. He says, but it's what you do with what you make that makes a difference. So that resonated early on, and I started off, buying a piece of commercial in Lake Stevens. And something back up from there. While I was renting commercial properties for the company and what have you to base out of. And it was just like every time you barely had a down payment to move on a piece, the thing bumps a couple bucks a square foot. You know what I mean? You're like, damn it, it's just out of reach, And I finally picked up my first piece in Lake Stevens, and Dad was really good at it. Dad taught me how to buy. Much like we've philosophized about this, and we we parallel on the principles of how you acquire.
Yeah.
And so I just continued. So that first piece was heavy industrial, and bought 10 acres, and it was within a year or two, split it, paid for the piece, other half of what I had, plus, and then now I got a foundation. I'm on my way,
Right.
And then by 2000 or so, I had several pieces. I did, I did some multifamily stuff, split it, held it, sold it, spun it, 1031s, and it really multiplies. It if you stay true to it and apply that, and you can do it in your spare time. It isn't like it's got to be your main focus. Earthwork is your main focus, but it's just phone calls and stuff that you're doing in between. And then it grew into a 61 lot plat in Oak Harbor, and I'm trying to think of what other major. We had the storage facility that was actually built on the property in Lake
In
Stevens.
Lake Stevens, yeah.
Big commercial building I did on that same property.
How
You know,
many storage units in that Lake Stevens?
I believe it wasn't a huge one. I think it was like 365.
Just 365.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good size.
But it had the commercial and then or the warehouse property with office space and then the
Right.
behind it. It was a nice piece.
You know, I have this. There's a lot of people that are out there doing a job because it's what they know, it's what they have, and it pays the bills. They're keeping that job because it's what keeps them responsible. But they have this desire to get involved in real estate. They have an instinct, a knowledge that if this is understood and applied, that this is what's going to get you ahead and get you a wealth portfolio. But they don't know how to make the transition. And one of the things that at least a step in the right direction is getting a little closer to the action, getting in kind of a related field even, right? To where you're not going to a hospital weighing people and checking them in and getting their blood by day. In your case, you're on a job site moving dirt and seeing what developers and builders are doing there. At the very least, you're charging them for what you're doing, but you're in and around the action. You know, if you want to be a pilot, hang around the airport kind of thing. And so the related industries, general contracting, remodeling contracting, any of the specialties in construction, earthworks, for example. Of course, the appraisal world, the world of escrow and title and lending and all of the related industries that tie to real estate get you a little closer to the action, your ears to the pavement, your hearing of opportunities. And I find that it's much easier to segue real estate into your life if you can just get a little closer to the fire. And you've done that beautifully over the years, and I think that's huge. One of the things, Mark, that I believe and talk about these days, given the challenges of vertical infrastructure and the continual challenges of getting through cities and counties and moving towards a very complicated building to a completion, that can be a real ass-kicking these days. But the world of mobile home parks, RV parks, things that the main infrastructure is underground, and when you've got a final grade and a fence, you're open for business. Your family had mobile home parks, and there's a great story about your dad and the water system of that park. I want you to tell that story.
Okay, it's one of my favorites, and I can get emotional. So
I understand.
Hang on here.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so my dad had near 100-unit mobile home park, let's just say, in the Oak Harbor area. And as a young man, I believe he was 34 when I did the math, flew to Oak Harbor, in his airplane. And to back up, he grew up in Oak Harbor. So he was already known, but had moved away. So he comes back up as a young man. He's done extremely well in the Bellevue area, doing what my brother and I do now. And he comes up there and meets up with the Roadsant family, and they have a 40-acre piece that they're going to turn. And he goes up and, talks to Mr. Roadsant, and he's sitting there. Mr. Roadsant says, "Well, son," he says, "I don't know what your plans are with this property, but you need to know there's no water here." And Dad's like, "Okay." Duly noted, He says, "We got a, gallon and a half in this hole and 2 gallons a minute in this hole." And he said, "We've just carved out a living, damn near starved to death, at a bulb farm on this property." And I think this was in about 65. So, yeah, that'd be about right. And So Dad goes home, and we're raised spiritual, and we believe. I've been raised by my parents with very strong faith, and so Dad goes home and he has a dream that night, or shortly thereafter. And in that dream, he feels he was shown exactly where to drill the well. Exactly. So, against Bert's warnings, he closes the deal. And my grandfather had the gift of witching. He could witch. So they go up there and to a forked willow on the place, and they cut down a branch, and they're walking around and talking, and he said, well, a little water there, but not what you're looking for. Probably speaking in Dutch. I'm Dutch. And they spoke about 50-50 when they were together. So the kids, they want to say something private or whatever, or talk about us, they said it in Dutch. So,
Right.
But so they go up to where my dad had the dream, and the story has it, the stick drew down hard, and where the bark squeaked in his hand. And he says, oh, son, he says, there's what you're looking for. He said, but it's deep. So on that, the deal is closed, and they're all shaking their heads, and the kid's crazy. Calls up Dennis Faber, would-be well drillers, and says, Dennis, we got I want to drill a well up here. And Dennis tells me, says, no water on that property, huh? He said, well, I want to drill a well. Okay. So he goes down. Okay.
It's price per foot,
Yeah.
whether we hit it or not.
The kid says, we're going to, okay.
Yeah.
And he acts on the ground and don't drill a well right there. So they drill a well, and Dad gets a phone call, as the story goes. We're at 125, and now we got a dry hole, kid. What do you want to do? He says, Dad says, keep going. 250. I think, 350. It was somewhere in there. It was that you need to bring up some money, get current,
Right.
And he says, I don't know what you think you hope to accomplish here. He says, well, how deep can you go? He says, well, bedrock's 500. And so Dad says, he says, I probably might get to 450. He says, well, we're here now. Keep going. He got a phone call at 425 feet deep. It says, you now have the highest producing well in Whidbey Island.
Wow. And on that property, he built a mobile home park.
And a storage facility.
Yeah.
And so then we were only going to be there for 90 days. So we went up there while Dad was building it. I think it was the summer. It would have been the summer of 67. And so we went up there, and we were only going to be there for 3 months. My mom told him, don't you park me on that rock. They're Kirkland Bellevue people. They were used to a little different,
Right.
atmosphere. Nordstrom's was Frederick and Nelson was just up the street, right?
Right. Yeah, right.
And so anyway, she says, don't you park me on that rock. He said, no, 90 days, we get a manager, and we're right back, down in Kirkland and Houghton.
Right.
And so anyway, after 90 days, they looked at each other and they said, what a great place to raise a family.
This rock ain't that bad.
No. Enrolled us in school, and
Yeah.
that was history.
Yeah.
We all grew up there. My parents lived in that house all the way to the end.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
and now my brother owns that mobile home park. So still going.
That's awesome.
But I was going to speak on that at some point probably in my life, and basically it's one act of faith, and that property. Now, Dad, did have means when he came up, but nothing like what he aspired to later on. One act of faith was the oasis of all we are as a family today, because out of that birthed everything else. One act of faith, and it's inspired me. We don't want to step out blindly.
Yeah.
But you got to step out.
That's powerful, Mark, and it makes you ask the question. At least it does me in my mind. Where has there been a crossroads where I knew I felt called, but for whatever reason I stepped out, I bailed out, and you wonder, You know, I I I feel a bit that way. If anybody's listening to this hasn't listened to podcast 0, I gave a long, hard thought about this, knowing deep in my soul that this is something that needs to happen. But boy, I'll tell you, does the anti-you, they get it gets off the bench and in the game when you're moving in the right direction. It wants status quo. It wants you to stay the same. It wants just don't take those kind of steps and risks. But you learn over the years that voice that goes, "Yeah, well, listen, we're going to 500 feet. We're doing this. I don't care if you haven't hit it yet. We're going." And I feel that way about this podcast, that we're going. I just believe that things like this and messages like this, already what we've talked about, are messages that people need to hear. And I've witnessed you living this way. It's not fearless. It's action in spite of fear. It's who doesn't get freaked out when you're venturing into something new, but your faith and your principles, you've made the decision already. I'm going. It's not that I don't get a little gut ache, tingly, but you're going because you've chosen that belief over the obstacles that appear to logically be able to overcome you. No, we're going to figure it out. So I love that, and the stories of your dad are just epic in my mind. Tell me about your kids. You've got 3 kids, and they all have a role right now in your business and in what you do. Talk to me about them.
Well, they've all had intermittent roles in business, and obviously, like me, raised in business. You know, there's a difference. When kids come from that self-employed structure, you know, we could be on a mountaintop and we can be in a valley.
Yeah.
You know, but we celebrate both views. And so they know what it is to, you know, want for nothing. They know what it is to add a little more structure back in your life. You know, and so they've all been involved in the company early on. The daughters, you know, owned Sitework Technologies. Their participation was low just because when they were away at college, obviously, I was the general manager and taking care of it. And it was a great device to fund the education that now they've applied. One of them being an attorney and the other one working in the legal field as well, for King County. Then my sons are the ones that have truly embraced it. And like my dad told me, if you don't love this, don't follow me. But if you like it, it is an amazing field to be in, and it's always exciting, and it's always fun. And like you were talking about taking risks or stepping out, you know, I've kind of pity people that have never felt that alive before, because it's when you take on that, and I do it regularly in a contract or a deep hole or whatever it may be. You take it on, you conquer it. And you don't. There's a lot of unknowns in life, but you got to step out. To be alive, you got to step out.
But there's nothing better than calculated risk, and then you bring your best game. You got a way of pulling this off that most wouldn't try, and you do it, and you get paid really well for the risks that you've taken that you knew you could navigate. It takes expertise. It's like landing on a short runway. It's like, okay, it can be done, but you got to know what you're doing.
Right.
But you have confidence in yourself, and passing that on. I don't know that you can pass on anything greater to your kids than confidence that you got this. You can do this. That's fantastic. the one of your sons recently purchased a piece of real estate, and I just know the thumbnail of the story, but you're also teaching this side of things to encourage them that, okay, you've got these tools and abilities, now let's start stacking up some land, because you know what to do with the land once you get it. Or if it's a land that has a tough time perking or has some issues, well, we know how to fix issues in the land world. So that makes me happy too, that you're passing on that real estate knowledge as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Take me back, Mark, to this is an abrupt transition, but you were one of the few, and perhaps maybe the most talked about presentation ever in the history of the All-Star in Las Vegas. If you went back to 2000, and let's just start it at 2007, 8, you and I shared a relationship with 3 banks that were the primary development lending, construction lending banks in the Northwest: Frontier Bank, Horizon Bank, Citibank of Linwood. Those 3 banks all were taken out by the feds in a period of about 6 months in 2008-ish, 9, right in there. Take me back to that time in your life, and marry that time in your life with a building a dream home project. Walk me through that whole story of that time, not only the economic world and how it was changing, but your hard work and effort that led to building this house and how that turned out.
Do you want me to go back to the fire and
Absolutely.
Okay.
Just
So
walk me
that
through
started actually around 2000, probably late 2004. Purchased 15 acres on Pinneo Island. Nice view, nice flat piece. And it wasn't the perfect time, but again, one of those jump out there and, I think we'll be okay type of thing. But if people knew how much money I started with in my bank account, they'd say, hey, you're out of your mind, But again, just like the other home I built, you start off, and I looked at my wife and I said, there could be a better time for this than right now, but give her a whirl.
Right.
So we had sold our other house on the hill. We moved into a rental house, 3 bedroom, 1 bath, 6 people living in it. It's going from 4,800 square feet at the time down to probably, 1,400 and 1 bathroom. That's tight living,
Right.
But
Yeah.
Anyway, so we start off building this dream home, and it was 10,000 living with the heated space for cars and stuff. It was about 12,000 total. And we were 2 weeks away. So I basically built this house. This was as big as I could dream at the time. Slate roof, granite exterior veneers, granite pavers, exterior veneer, 100% copper flashing, copper gutters, some copper roofing, trim, big triple build crowns. Everything was crowned, even closets were crowned. And black walnut Brazilian cherry throughout. And so we're 2 weeks from moving into this place. We were going to move into the basement because the basement was bigger than the rental we were living in. So the basement was right there being finished. 2 weeks before we were moving in, I get a call at 4 a.m. from the neighbor across the street, a lady crying. And she says, I don't know how to tell you this. She said, but your house is totally engulfed in flames. I'll get it here in a minute.
Yeah.
Didn't think it'd get this emotional, but it just does.
Well,
You know.
it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
So
this is a dream and a heart and a whole bunch of work and effort and you know.
and we were betting it all. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
and I didn't have a bank loan.
Right.
This was
Yeah.
doing it the hard way.
Yeah.
So I go there and the first thing I'm thinking is, Lord, no, make it the barn next door. Make it a mistake. And as you get closer, I mean, I went to where we were living at the time was on a bluff, and I could see the glow in the sky. Probably some 5 miles away. And so we tell the kids we're going to be back, like 4 a.m. Tell the kids we're going to be back. Dad's got to go look at something real quick. And so we head over there, and, it's the house, and she's gone. I mean, it's gone. And I'm watching stuff collapse inside, And I had just sold a 67 RSSS 375 horse 396 convertible pace car. 89 Porsche 911 turbo cab. Sunsetter LXI Malibu ski boat. Anyway, a bunch of toys that were personal articles of gratification to buy just part of the trim package that was in that house, to watch it all fall through the floor. And it was crushing. So then I'm sitting there, and after I've been broken for a few minutes, I'm sitting there and I'm counting, and Carla says to me, she says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I don't know if I've got enough granite," because I had enough granite to build the shop next door and a pool house. I said, "I don't know if we've got enough granite to refinish the outside of that thing again." Because it was a special granite I had brought in from Pennsylvania out of a street that had been reclaimed. It was really old world theme. It was really cool. And my taste, really cool. And she goes, "You're already thinking about rebuilding it?" I said, "Well, what else are we going to do?" I said, "It's gone. Dust off." And I was already rebuilding it with that hour. I mean, in my mind, I was planning how we were going to put that thing back together. And then I said, "Well, time to get out of here." I mean, fire department, it was a 4 or 5 alarm fire. I mean, it was just polluted with fire trucks and firemen and what have you. And she says, "Where are we going?" She says, "We're going back to the house." She says, "What for?" I said, "I'm not going to face the news crews looking like this." And she says,
I just got out of bed.
"Yeah." And, my hair, and she says, "You really think the news is coming?" I says, "All 3 of them.
They're
All
coming.
3.
Yeah.
And she said, "Really?"
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, let's go get a shower." So
Yeah.
we raced back to the house, and by the time we got back there, all 3 of them were on me.
Yeah.
Are you the owner of the home? Yes, I am. And then at that point, it had been established as an eco-terrorist burn already.
An eco-terrorist burn.
Yeah.
A group of people who, for whatever reason, felt like the solution to the world's problems was to burn down your home in protest for using too much natural resources. Is that it? Yeah.
But if they really knew me, when I build things along that line, what makes them very unique is you bring the old back into the new. You bring recycled. That had a recycled slate roof on that house. All the exterior veneer was recycled. Some of the interior trim was recycled, because that's what made it. That's what brought the unique richness to it.
Right. I remember in Las Vegas, I think we even saw a news clip, but one of the reporters said, do you have a message that you'd like to deliver to these eco-terrorists who burnt down your house?
Yeah, it was, I think his name was Roger Johnson, but it was Channel 7. So I just get done talking to the police chief or a fire chief or whatever it was, and I turn around and I mean microphone in your face, and he says, "If you could say something to the terrorists that burned your house down right now," he said, "what would you tell them?" And it was just like that. I just said, "I forgive you." most powerful thing I've ever said in my life. Because I took everything away from them.
Yeah. Right.
They had nothing on me. And then he followed up with, but if you could see justice, what would justice look like to you? And again, it was instant. I said, vengeance is not mine, but they will be handled by the laws and the confines of our Constitution and what we're based on as a nation, and something along that line. But I basically quoted, "Vengeance is not mine, saith the Lord; I will repay." So,
and immediately you started the process of starting over and rebuilding. Starting over. You were able to use some foundation pieces. Starting over.
The foundation was all that was left.
Right.
And some of that had to even be patched.
Right.
But yeah, we and then even when we started to rebuild it, we were out there cleaning bricks. Basically, I was knocking walls down and cleaning bricks. I had an excavator out there. We had people from the community show up and help. It was really cool.
And so the rebuilding process. Here we go for another year and a half, 2 years.
So then that was so they burned down on January 16th, 2006, and we moved into it September 2007. Finished. And we built it back even better than it was before. I mean, I even went further in my finishes because I was able to dream just a little bit bigger. And I thought I would finish out my days there. It was built as my last. This was my last role.
Right. Right.
But
take me from there. You move in 2007.
2007, and moved back out in June of 2012. After I thought I was invincible, and I would. This is probably a takeaway that we can relate to, but maybe many that are new investors would not. Be careful with banks. I didn't know 50 cents on the dollar on anything, and had money in the bank, and it was almost like it was calculated. Bled you dry and then took it all. Even went behind my back and queered deals I had on stuff I was selling. It was dirty. And so I gave that house back to the bank in 2012. And that's why Sitework Technologies was fired up.
Yeah. I did a CD once on my 50th birthday. 50 things I've learned in 50 years. You should learn one thing a year. And although 0 to 1, I'm not sure. But, you make up for it later. You should know 50 things after 50 years. And I put a lot of things in no uncertain order. But from a business perspective, the one most important thing I've learned is that the relationship you have with the banker, although it may look one way and feel one way, when push comes to shove, the literal terms of the agreement are all that matter. And that bankers themselves have a certain amount of vulnerability. Hence, Frontier Bank, Horizon Bank, Citibank, all being force sold as banks to a receiving bank at that time, which was Union Bank of California. And the receiving bank receives all of these loans on the books, say, here you go, you get it all. If they modify those loans in any way or work with you in any way, it removes them from their loss share agreement that they have with the federal government. And so it builds in incentive for them to not touch, modify, in other words, stay with the terms of the literal written agreement in every way, shape, and form. And if they touch it, then they take it out of their insurance pool that gets paid on their loss share agreement. And so there were many, many developers and builders who had lines of credit to operate their businesses that the fine print says the bank could call the note due at any moment they wanted to for any reason they wanted to. But here you had this relationship that had gone on for years and years and years. I mean, I knew the presidents of all three of those banks very well. And in a heartbeat, they're all gone looking for a job. They're gone. They have no power to, they would love to do what we've always done for years, but it wasn't a relationship-based exchange when push comes to shove. It was a technical paperwork that says, here's what we can do. I was fortunate in that I had no outstanding unsecured lines of credit with those banks during that time. But I think about everybody else I know did, and my phone started exploding that, wow, my line of credit just got called due, and I've got to pay it now. And if I don't pay it like now, here comes this leaning process of every asset everybody had. It was just overnight. Mm-hmm. And the vulnerability that you enter into when you deal with a federally insured bank, I think I just tell everybody, take your loan documents, read every word, highlight them. There's better ways of structuring finance that build in shock absorbers to the unknowns of life. Honestly, I'd say 3/4 of the deal structuring I've thought on and created and teach and do has been a reflection of the vulnerability that I've felt when my life is in the hands of a bank and I'm feeling out of control. I don't like that feeling. To me, that was a devastating time. I honestly can hardly think of a builder developer that I've known for years in the Northwest that during that period of time didn't get devastated with those three banks being taken out of business and forced sold, and the vulnerability and the juggling that everybody had to do, and many people just lost a ton during that time. You go forward with a different philosophy. I remember in Las Vegas you declaring that, well, there's something I've learned here in that banks, I'm going to build this again, but I'm not going to use banks. Mm-hmm. Pick the story up from there. How have you, from 2012, in the last decade plus, how have you operated differently given the realities that I think we all learned during that time?
Can I back up just for 1 second?
Absolutely.
And add?
Yep.
And so I'll tell you what my biggest demise was. If I could just take a brief second.
Yeah.
My biggest demise, as I reflect, and up to 2000, I never had an operating line. Mm-hmm. I was out of pocket.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I had equipment loans, but that was it. Deeds of trust, mm-hmm. only on my real estate. Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of the deed of trust.
Mm-hmm. Private notes.
Money. Yeah.
Private notes.
Mm-hmm. Private notes
Mm-hmm.
with renewal clauses.
Mm-hmm.
Then I started to branch out. I was doing more stuff. I was relationships with banks, tons of equity because of the way I built it. Mm-hmm. And I had, 20-year AMs, 30-year AMs, da 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 da, but they were a little higher interest rate. Here is the biggest mistake. Me and thousands like me, we bought the lie, and it was, hey, if you would go to a 3 and 5 year renewable note, you could save. And yeah, I did. It was like $10,000 a month, in the scope of things. I mean, who wouldn't want to buy it on $10,000 a month, right? Biggest mistake. If I'd have left my notes in place, I wasn't having trouble making my payments. It was the renewals. Nothing would appraise, nothing. So if I could say anything to investors that are out there, don't ever do the short term with renewables if you can help it.
Right.
Always at least 20s.
Right.
At least 20s.
Right.
You can always pay it faster.
Right.
But you can't. But those balloons, I just want to back up and say that.
Yeah. No.
That's what took me out.
Absolutely. And this is where they, again, in times past, if there was a 3-year note, okay, you had this great relationship with Jim or Jerry or Chris, or, I mean, same guys, right? And they would go, oh, yeah, it's you. You're our best client, and you bet. We'll give it another 3 or 5. And nobody ever really thought of the danger of that. But all of a sudden now the bank is foresold, and here's a due date coming, and nobody's going to deal with you. You either pay it off in full, or we're not going to modify it. We're not going to work with you. We're going to file a notice of default here, and we're going to anticipate a deficiency, and therefore we're going to lien everything in the world you have, which makes it unsellable at that point. And it's just bam, and it happened overnight.
5-day personal writ of garnishment. It's what they call that. You cannot buy, sell anything.
Nothing.
You're done.
You're done. Yeah.
You are done.
Yeah. And I'll never forget that 2-week period, because just about everybody that I know and admire, and man, I love builders. I love developers. I love people who are just there making it happen. They're a different breed, and they're tough. My phone was exploding. And are you navigating anything with Frontier, with Horizon, with Citibank? And I go, man, I'm not, amazingly. What's going on? And it was this, wow, you can't even believe this. It's just hardball. There's no, and all the people that we've always dealt with, they're gone. They're gone. And here's what's happening. And I don't know, that vulnerability, Mark, is we get so focused sometimes on offense. And I think the older I get, I think as much around defense. And boy, the advice you just gave, I give it every single day. It's these short-term notes of any kind, They work off an optimistic perspective that values are going to go up, that things are going to be full, that everything's going to be fine, and I'll refinance it later. I hear of this, all of it, but all it takes is a blip, a change of interest rates, a change of markets, this and that, where all of a sudden things aren't appraising, things aren't cash flowing the same. The cap rates are changing radically and quickly, and all of a sudden values are falling, and now you go into a need to have to refinance to keep a new loan going, and you can't, and the lender being under scrutiny. There's the perfect storm. It's a bomb that just went off. And so how do you play defense with that? Well, your advice is absolutely spot on. I want to go back to a soundbite. I have never in the history of my educational world had so many conversations, more so than the conversation that has stemmed from one of your sound bites. And I'm going to remind you, but then I want you to expand on it because you'll remember it. In Las Vegas, this is the second time now you've built the house. You're there. You're trying to hang in there during now all of this economic time, and the day came that okay, the bank's taken over and you're leaving, and you had a conversation as it were with God as you're sort of driving out of the driveway in a old pickup, like kind of like, why is this happening to me? Well, I've tried to do this, I've tried to do that. Take it from there, because the that conclusion, that the answer has sparred many a conversation.
Remember it like it was yesterday.
I know you do. Yeah.
So, one by one, the collapse is happening, and it doesn't happen overnight. You see it coming, and and I pulled off so many, just acrobatic moves in my past, and I'm thinking there'll be a windfall, there'll be this. The faith continues that we're gonna come flying out of this thing one way or another.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we're not.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, we are going down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel like I'll be in your airplane here, and I'm got the thing just wound for sound. We don't even dare put the wheels down because the grass is hitting the wings, and we're pulling back on that thing just as hard as we can, trying to gain some altitude, and we're going in.
Yep, we're going in.
We're going in, but we're betting it all. It was like that. And so I'm going down the road, and as much as, I had prayed in humility up to that point, asking for God's help, and I got indignant, got angry. And I in my humanness, I called God out, and I said, I don't understand, and I need some answers, as if I deserved them, And I said, I have given every time that I know of that you've laid it on my heart. I have paid my tithes to the church. Not according to your word, but according to what you've asked of me. I have given offerings whenever your spirit led me that direction. And I said, and I don't understand. You bring me to this place of prosperity. Everything I've touched has turned to gold. The house is burned to the ground, and you give me the wherewithal to build it again. And this amazing, and we come to this place, and I'm now losing it all, and I don't understand, and I need to know now why. And I can tell you exactly where it was, because I had to pull over. It was like I got yelled at. Not audibly, not like a movie would make it seem, but I'm saying in here. I got smartened up. I got slapped. And he said most clearly, this is not about you. I had made it about me. Me statements are dangerous. Me's eyes, and at that point I had to repent, because I had made it about me.
And this is the sound bite that has spurred so many conversation. There's many scenarios in life I've felt and others have felt failure. It just hits you like a brick. It could be failure of a project that went bad, failure of something you missed that's going to cost you and people around you. Failure in a relationship, failure in a promise, failure. And you think, oh man, why? What? But this perspective of it's not all about you.
Mm-hmm.
That there's a bigger picture going on here. There's something happening that I know more about than you do. Speaking, if one could speak for God, it's that feeling of I'm seeing a much bigger picture here. Trust me. I think of the earthquakes that have happened, Mark, that have an earthquake that has then led to an opportunity that I never would have seen were it not for the earthquake, or an earthquake that has caused personal change that I never would have had an awareness or a desire to change were it not for the earthquake. Or an earthquake that's happened that has given me empathy and understanding and a language that I didn't really want to know, but now I know and I see the world differently. You know, and that understanding becomes almost one of your greatest deliverables. One thing I know about you is that, and I'm going to assume that in part it's come from these very challenging chapters, is that you don't judge anybody. Anybody. You know, walk a mile in their shoes before you even begin to understand what they're dealing with. And we live in a world of anonymous critics that coulda, shoulda, woulda, you know, very flippant sort of observation, 2 minutes of research, you know, here's what that person's about, or this is what they should have done. And you and I both have disdain for that person, because if you really dove in and understood that person that's struggling, that's going through a lot, well, they're just a different side of you. They're a reflection of you when you really get to it. We're all the same if we look at it that way. You've got incredible empathy and compassion for people because of so much, I feel, of what you've been through. And that shines bright, and it changes the world around you. Your transparency, your vulnerability. You're one of the most successful people I know. You know, I love going. I'm just going to give a glimpse, and shoot me if I'm, you know, telling stories. But you know, I go up to your yard, you know, your shop yard, and you know, my God, you know, it's like more equipment and trucks and all the big equipment, they're on a job site somewhere. This is just, you know, the leftovers, right? And it just looks like vehicles and trucks and trailers and backhoes and trackhoes and, you know, everything. And you think, oh my God, what is all this equipment out, you know? But then you go into some of the inner spaces of these garages and, you know, here's a car collection that you might be at the Barrett Jackson auction. You know, it's just, whoa, unbelievable. You walk around in jeans and you wear muddy boots and you come driving up in a dump truck with a fluorescent vest on, and you're Mark. I don't know. There's something about that scene that draws me so much. You don't have to show. Your heart says who you are, what you believe. And I think that the difficult chapters that you've been through are what make that. I don't know of a person I really like that hasn't been through some shit. Mm-hmm. I honestly don't. You know? So that deliverable, why do you think I mean, how has this all formed you, and therefore, what do you feel you deliver to people as a result, day in and day out?
I think you touched on it. I think it makes if you go through, my resume of successes and failures. We've been groomed. I'll say for such a time as this, and you run into people from all walks of life. On your journey,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it makes you very relatable, and you really realize. Not that I ever thought I was. 'Cause I think I've always been the same,
Mm-hmm.
even in my highs and in my lows. I think I'm the same person.
Mm-hmm.
But you do lose perspective when you're way on top.
Mm-hmm.
A normal conversation to you that you might be talking about buying a whatever
Mm-hmm.
would be like absolutely mind blowing,
Mm-hmm.
possibly but you don't even think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you've walked here and you've walked here, maybe I've walked here and I've went there and I've been and back and
Mm-hmm.
and all over, you find yourself much more compassionate
Mm-hmm.
for people in their time of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you're going to buy them out of your situation, but you're going to lend them an ear.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe some people just need someone to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they just need a friend,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's for a brief time and space.
Mm-hmm.
Be that for
Mm-hmm.
person,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah. I think too that in when people have great successes, you you are able to embrace those in a different way too. In other words, there's no jealousy or envy because you've been there and you know what that takes. You know the commitment and the effort and the I have great friend and students who just finished building a building here in Seattle that, let's just say, it has about roughly a $30 million valuation. It's such a beautiful building. And to me, it's almost like I don't care how it ultimately turns out. Did you win or lose? You did this.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it takes to pull
Mm-hmm.
something like that off. This is unbelievable. And so you have this appreciation for things in a different way. It's not just did it make money? Did you, as your dad said, did you give it your very best? Did you leave it all on the playing field? Did you sign your name with every detail that said, I gave it my very best? To me, that's a measure of success that far outweighs any monetary value you could ever have. That satisfaction that comes from, I gave this my very best, and I feel good about that effort. So I think the highs and the lows, you can relate to people.
Mm-hmm.
You can celebrate with them in a different way because you've pushed that hard, and you can empathize with them in a dark place because you've been there too.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that range is what connects us to humanity, and that range is in everybody's life in a relative basis, and yet somehow we only want to show this little sliver, this photoshopped picture in the middle that says, oh, everything's good and fine and isn't it all wonderful? That's just not real. It's not life. It's not intended to be life. There's no growth there.
No.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Growth happens most of the time in a crosswind, in times of adversity is when we really reach and stretch. I think that's why you're one of the greatest people I know. You've grown. Every day you're growing because you're pressing.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Wow.
And I find that the things that used to be so important aren't near as important as they used to be. And your values change,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
You just had a 60th birthday. What a awesome, amazing celebration that was. And as you look down this next chapter of life, if you were to take an assessment of yourself, an honest assessment of yourself, what would you say are the few greatest strengths, and where are there areas of your life that you're trying to shore up, push harder on, improve, etc.?
I would say that probably my greatest strength is my drive, and just I never give up. You know, even when you're just beat up, tired, you say, no, I gotta go. I gotta go. You know, we're gonna keep turning over stones till we find it. You know, it's like getting a deal. I told a partner of mine in a deal one time. I said, "This is what we have. This is crazy that we would ever be able to lock down this contract. It's crazy. I mean, we're really out of our element here." I said, "But if you can get me to the table that the people that make the decisions, and I'll get us that contract." And we did.
Yeah, we did.
You know, because you never give up. Even when someone says no, maybe it means not this way.
Right. Or not now.
Not now. Right. I don't receive no. You know, I don't receive no. So that would be my greatest. I think that's one of my greatest strengths, as well as the love and the empathy. I do have the gift of love. I really do think I do, because I don't judge. And if anything, it could be. And then when you talk about my weaknesses, I don't judge. You know, sometimes I probably give too much. I get accused of that all the time. Why do you let people take advantage of you? I got the ability to make more. You know, if they want to take that route out of my kindness and goodness, then they've set their own path. I'll be restored. I'm not worried about it. You know, I have that. So, and on a funny side, I'm technologically challenged. And back to what I told you earlier, I hire people for that, you know, because, you know, I'm a lot of pad and paper and you know, I can make my way around a keyboard, you know, but technologically challenged, and I need continual growth in organization. You think you just never quite achieve that bar.
Right.
You need better organization all the time, you know.
I'll be honest. I walked under your yard just a few weeks ago, and I was waiting for you, and I'm just sitting there waiting. I'm like walking around your yard, and I got this feeling of overwhelm. Like, do you insure all these vehicles? Do you maintain all these vehicles? I mean, God, just to do an oil change and everything I'm looking at would cost $100,000. I was just blown away at the scope of it all. How would you organize this? How would you put this in a system to keep everything working and running? And oh my God, my breakers blew.
If you go in the driver's room, you'll see a board, and everything is listed with every scheduled maintenance.
Unbelievable.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's updated, you know, as it goes.
Right. The organization of all that is just mind-bending. But
it's part of stewardship, though.
Yeah,
you know,
it is.
Buy nice stuff, got to keep it good.
When this journey, and we never know, as you and I are, you know, we're seeing it all around us now. But when this journey is said and done, there's going to be a memorial. You might be there at mine. I might be there at yours. We don't know. At yours, who's going to show up, and what are they going to say?
Well, no one's going to show up, Greg, because we're all going to live forever. Right? No, I would say I don't expect anyone to be there that's of great notoriety, but who will be at mine is a bunch of really very real people. I do, because the people that I see coming are people that I've touched in my journey. And that's one thing I think we want to be always, you know, there's a short dash between our dates, but that dash is everything. And it's the lives we touch along that journey that far outweigh. We're not taking any of this with us.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Business and acquisition is the game. But the impressions, the lasting impressions, and what you do for others along the journey is what is the true value.
That's what sticks. Yeah.
That's what sticks.
Every one of these podcasts, Mark, we put a bow on it with the thought of consider. And as I thought about how I wanted to wrap this up and knowing you, what jumps off the page about knowing you more than anything and knowing our journey together is as much as anything I can think of about you is just your undying, persistent focus and effort towards what I'm going to categorize as true north, your faith. It's taken you through everything. You come back to it constantly. It's your compass. And so years ago, I wrote a very, very simple ism that you're never lost if you can point to true north. And I think you and I talk about that a lot in this very twisted mile that we seem to run. That, okay, but where's north? That way's north. And keep trying and keep going and don't stop. And no matter how beat up and bumped up you get, refocus on true north. Take a deep breath, regain your perspective, and go forward. And there's our journey, I think, in a nutshell. But I so appreciate you being here. And for all of you who are listening in, I hope that you've taken some notes on some of the Verbarendse-isms that have been laid out. It's been a fantastic time, Mark. Thank you again for listening. God bless you.
Thank you.